There are 5 reasons that sitting makes your back pain worse. And I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do today to start to eliminate that. One of the things I get, probably the most common complaint I get, is sitting makes my back pain worse. It's very common, and we live in a culture where we sit all day long, so it's a chronic problem. Matter of fact, back pain is getting worse in our entire country, entire world is getting worse, and it's because of sitting. I, as you know or may not know, struggled with back pain for 10 years, and everything I tried to do didn't make me any better, it made me worse. And eventually I found a way out. When I had pain, it hurt when I sat, it hurt when I stood, it hurt when I moved, it hurt when I bent, it really did everything hurt. I had a severely degenerated disc, herniated disc, bulging disc, and I've truly dedicated the last 27 years of my life trying to eliminate it, and we have a solution. Matter of fact, we have a solution better than others. And we spent time over that 27 years doing research on what causes back pain and really the best way to eliminate it. So we've sort of identified the most important variables for you to fix your back. We've done 8 different studies. We've been published in medical journals that are archived in PubMed.gov, the National Library of Medicine. We've been seen in several different TV shows. I got better. I found a way out, and you too can get better. But the real question is, what are the reasons for back pain while you sit? And there are 5 of them, but more importantly, what you first have to understand is the spine, because the changes that take place as a result of the sitting directly affect the discs of your spine. 24 vertebrae between the head and the hips, and the vertebrae are the bones. In between each bone there is a disc. The disc is a lot like a jelly donut in the sense that the outside the disc there's a very thick material. Inside the disc there is a jelly-like substance. And this jelly can move. Because it is jelly, it will start to move. And that is part of why we have a problem when we sit too long. It's because of that jelly. So the spine is designed to function best in 3 positions, or the 3 curves of the spine. So the spine functions best when the neck curves in, and then the thoracics curve out, and then the lumbars curve back in. This is called a lordosis. Okay, the lordosis is held in place by the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, and everything else that sort of supports it. But what can happen when you're seated for too long, you develop what's called ligamentous creep. So all these ligaments that attach to the back end of the vertebrae when you're seated will start to stretch. And as they stretch out, you'll develop what's called a flattening of your spine. And it's the seated position tends to put us in where we're having a flatter spine, and the longer you sit, the more all these ligaments and tendons start to stretch out. They call it ligamentous creep. And what's really happening is it's just sort of stretching out. So a normal healthy spine should have a curve like this. But what happens is the longer you sit, the straighter it gets. And as it gets straighter, what it does is it has a tendency to push the disc back. So a healthy spine will have a little bit of the curve in there like we talked about, but when it starts to straighten out, it'll start to push the disc back. And as it does that, because of the jelly, the nucleus will start to push back into the annulus. And then the annulus will start to get aggravated from that pressure. And that aggravation will start to cause some inflammation. The inflammation over time will start to cause a little bit of a tear. So that what happens is the annulus will start to tear from the flattening of the spine, from the ligamentous creep. As it tears and the nucleus starts to push out, first phase is a bulge. So it's not uncommon, you sit too long, you might develop a bulging disc. Over time, if it tears even further, and the longer you've had it, the more tearing you're going to get, it can lead to a herniation. The seated position for too long can lead to herniated discs. It can happen, it does happen, we see it all the time. Again, it's probably the number one thing we see is, oh, it hurts when I sit. So reason number 1 is the creep. Reason number 2 is the nucleus starting to push out. Reason number 3 is the muscles in the front, the flexors, because your legs are bent, will start to get very tight. So you get very tight hip flexors. And when you have very tight hip flexors, which are the muscles in the front, what happens is that will perpetuate the process of pushing the nucleus back. But also what it does is it leads to what's called glute amnesia, gluteus maximus amnesia. So the overactive tight muscles in the front, the hip flexors, will start to cause the glutes to slowly turn off. Neurologically, they'll turn off. It's called reciprocal inhibition. It's the nervous system communication pattern. So what happens is, as I lift up my arm, as my arm goes up and my bicep contracts, my tricep relaxes. That's what allows joints to move. It's called reciprocal inhibition. But when one muscle's too tight for too long, the muscle that does the opposite activity starts to get weaker and neurologically turn off. It becomes what we call altered reciprocal inhibition. So the nervous system causes that muscle to slowly turn off. And it's a combination of the change in the tendons as they stretch and creep, and the muscles getting tighter, and the one muscle neurologically turning off as it forces that nucleus out even further. But you'll start to develop changes in your posture called lower cross syndrome. Lower cross syndrome is where you have tight hip flexors, tight lumbar erector spinae, weak glutes, weak abdominal muscles, and weak glutes. It forms a cross, lower cross syndrome. That changes your posture, and your posture starts to develop that as a habit. And the longer you sit, the more you'll develop this as a habit pattern, and the more that disc is going to push out, and the more the annulus gets aggravated. So it's a combination of these 5 things. So it's not just one thing. You have to fix all 5. But it's too much pressure will actually cause the nucleus to push out. And we've seen this on MRIs. We've done the motion analysis and we've seen the discs come out on the MRIs. We've done it in a seated position where we're bending on it. So what is the goal? The goal is to eliminate the load on the disc to try to get the pressure off the disc so the nucleus can slowly migrate back to the inside. That's step 1. So step 1 is take a postural break. You've seen this. Posture break is when you're in your chair. What you do is you slide to the front of your chair where your glutes are barely hanging on there. You're sitting on sort of your tailbone, and then you drop your arms to the side, and what you do is you roll your shoulders back. And as you roll your shoulders back, what it'll do is it'll slowly start to add a little bit more curve to the spine. So step 1 is every 30 minutes, what you're going to do is you're going to sit in the seated position where you're taking the pressure off. Okay? And then step number 2 is you're going to get up every hour and walk around. You don't have to walk far, walk around for 2 minutes. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent too much ligamentous creep. If you take what's called micro breaks, those micro breaks will prevent it from getting too stretched and sort of keep you back in that more neutral, natural position where you have the curve on there. So it's those 2 things. Our main goal is to take the pressure off the disc. If you're seated for too long, if you're sitting too long, what happens, it's like hitting your thumb with a hammer. Okay, we know you have a problem with that disc, and that seated position is going to cause the inflammation. And the inflammation causes a sensitivity. It's super sensitive. Okay, everything hurts. And it's kind of like hitting your thumb with a hammer. I've talked about this before. If you keep hitting your thumb with the hammer, it's going to be very, very swollen. And just touching it a little bit is going to cause you a great deal of pain. That's the sensitivity that takes place as a result of the inflammatory process. So the first stage is to decrease the inflammation and decrease the sensitivity. But we have to deal with all 5 components. So the first component really was all about the ligamentous creep. We have to prevent the ligamentous creep, but we have to address the tight hip flexors. We have to address the glute amnesia, and we have to address the postural change that takes place, because it's not just one problem, it's all the problems that lead to the pressure on the disc. So after you start feeling better, our goal is we have to start to create some stability in the spine. And then we have to restore the motion to the hips and the hip flexors to make sure that the hip flexors are doing what they should be doing. But if you do this too soon, like if you go just directly to a hip stretch, you're going to aggravate the discs. So you start with phase 1 and you work your way through. It's a step-by-step process. I've talked about this before. If you do it in the wrong order, it doesn't work, and then you think, oh, this isn't going to help me. It will help you, but you have to do it in the right order. That's the key to all this. Because I get this all the time. You probably heard me say this. People want to say, oh, what's the best stretch? Okay, I can give you the best stretch, but if you do it at the wrong time, it's going to make it worse. And I can give you the best exercise, but if you do it at the wrong time, it's going to make it worse. And if you do it at the wrong time and it makes you worse, in your head, you're like, I'm not going to get better. This isn't going to help me. It will help you, but you have to do it in this sequence. And you have to address all 5 issues. If you don't, then the problem's going to come back or the problem won't go away. So what's the third step? I said I was going to give you 3. The third step is we have a program that walks you through each one of these components. Slowly, as you go through this process, you have to restore all 5 components. You restore all 5 components, what happens is you get healing of the discs. Discs will heal. They're only not healing because you keep aggravating them and you keep hitting them with your hammer. So you have to let the disc heal, take the pressure off, decrease the sensitivity. It will get better with the healthy movement patterns and new habits, because this is all about habits. How you sit, how you bend, how you twist, how you move. You need to get up out of your chair. You need to move around. Even if you've been sitting in the same chair for 10 years, you got to get up and move around because you're only making it worse. So by doing these 5 things, you can make sure the pain doesn't come back. There is hope. Sometimes people are stuck, like, oh, there is no hope. This is not hard. Okay, you just have to do it step by step by step by step. You do the steps, they're simple steps, you can get your life back.